right, welcome to Nested Loops. We're doing the how to implement shape up parts, which Alex has, so I'll just turn it over to him.
Cool, thank you. So yes, this is the prologue we call it. Pretty short chapters just on how to implement shape up. So yep, here we go. How to implement shape up. So on this first chapter, they talk a lot about implementing shape up in Basecamp, which is of course the tool that they have built there at Basecamp. So Basecamp was built to implement shape up method, to implement the shape up method. Sorry. So their idea is instead of scattering work across multiple tools, Basecamp helps centralize project communication, task management, and documentation all in one place. And here's how they use it. So Basecamp team for shaping. So what they want you to do is they want you to create a Basecamp team for shaping. They call their team product strategy. So then you would add people who are doing the shaping plus trusted people who give feedback during the project. And you want to make sure to keep the group small. And they suggest using another channel to announce bets to a larger group. And in their example, they use their tool Basecamp HQ headquarters for that. So in the Basecamp team, they post pitches as messages on the message board. They create a separate message category called a pitch. Then they use the campfire chat room to bounce ideas and coordinate the betting table between cycles. They conduct the actual betting table meeting over video chat. So they use their chat room just as like a way to, sort of talk about ideas. But then when they want to have that legitimate betting meeting, they use a video chat for that instead of just a message board. And they share some photos here of what that sort of looks like. So, you can see here the message board on the left, that the pitches on the message board for the product strategy team. And they show sort of like, what those messages look like. So that's like a sketch drawn that they shared as a message. And here's one where this is what the actual announcements look like to that larger group. You can see here that they're using the Basecamp headquarters. So they really like to keep the actual team on Basecamp for the shaping small, so that way, that you don't have too many people commenting who are not people who are actually shaping the project, and then they just make their announcements, their wider announcements on a separate channel. So then they make a Basecamp project for the actual cycle project, so it's a new project for each cycle. So they create a Basecamp project for each of the projects in the 6-week cycle. One naming strategy is to prepend a name or number for the cycle. So for example, like a cycle for auto pay. So that's the cycle number plus what the actual feature is. Then they add the designers and programmers who are working on the project to the Basecamp cycle project. So each cycle project has the appropriate people on it. So those are pretty small teams, just the people who are actually working on that project in the cycle. And then they like to post a kickoff message on the message board with a pitch or just a restatement of the shaped work just for the team to be able to reference. So you can see here this picture on the right is them creating a new project with the cycle name and what the feature is. Here's a photo of them, adding the correct people to that project. Here's a photo of the actual statement of the work. So, just as a reference for the people working on the project. Then they use their to-do lists on the project for scopes. So when the team gets oriented and they start their sprint starting out spring and discovering tasks, they should map them into scopes. In Basecamp, the team creates a to-do list for each scope. Examples should be start auto pay or ACH options. Then they add design and programming tasks to each scope as a to-do item. So for example, start auto pay has one task for UI design and another for implementation. So the scopes include both the design work and the programming work. Right? So then team members can use the discussion thread on each to-do for status updates and questions. and they just repeat that as necessary. So you would add a to-do for, start auto pay, and then if there's a UI task for start auto pay, the programmer could, on that task ask, the designers for updates, and the designer could ask for updates on the programming work, and they just keep going through that as necessary, and then they share this photo of what that sort of looks like. So here's their to-dos, and the to-do list for each scope with the designer and programmer task underneath. So also they have a note that those are just the tasks that are discovered so far. And then they like to track the scopes on a hill chart, and this actually looks pretty cool. So it's possible to track scopes on base camps and the hill charts. They teach you how to do this, which is to navigate to the to-do list page for each scope and click the options menu in the upper right, click track on a hill chart. So that will display a hill chart at the top of the overall to-do section with the project with the dots corresponding to that scope. And then you can click update on the hill chart and drag the dots to show the progress from unknown to known to done. And you can use the annotation feature to add commentary when necessary. And it shows what that looks like. So this is what a to-do's hill chart looks like just when it started. And then this is what it's starting to look like as it's known. And, I thought it was actually a pretty cool way to sort of track progress in a project, definitely for the stakeholders, to sort of see where it's at and for everyone to see where it's at. Okay, and so that was the end of that chapter. And to me, it mostly just seemed almost like a marketing thing in some way. Just look, here's how Basecamp, here's how we built it exactly for ShapeUp. But it does seem like a very cool tool. I've never used it. So then they go into this section, which is to adjust to your size. So to apply ShapeUp to your company, we should separate out the basic truths from the specific practices. So this sort of means work has to come from somewhere, and it takes work to figure out what the right work is, which is essentially shaping. So shaping just lets us set clear boundaries and expectations for whoever does the work. And they go on to say, if we don't make trade-offs up front by shaping, we're going to likely be forced to make trade-offs later on in our work process when we are rushed and when deadlines come in. So it's much better to do the work in the beginning, obviously, and shape up rather than having to make those work trade-offs later on. So the above truths apply to all work, right, regardless of the size of your organization or team. So whether it's a small team or a large team, you're either doing the work up front to figure it out or you're doing it later. So now we want to look at applying ShapeUp and what that looks like at a small startup versus a team that's big enough for specialized roles. So small enough to wing it. When the team is small, everybody does a bit of everything and wears many hats. Because of all these different jobs one person might have, it's harder to commit to long chunks of uninterrupted time to a specific project. It's also easier to communicate and change direction when you're small, right? Because essentially you can just drop a message in a group chat, and if it's only 2 or 3 people, you can have everyone on the same page on what's going on in a very short time. Because of how small the team is, they can throw out if you have a very small team, you can throw out most of the structure. So you don't really need 6-week cycles. You don't need a cool down. You don't need formal pitches or a betting table. Instead, you can just set an appetite, shape what to do next, build it, then shape the next thing. They say that, your bets actually might have different sizes each time. So, on one project, it might be 1 week, and then on the next, it might be 3 weeks, and not to really worry about that. Essentially, you still want to shape, bet, and build, but you're doing it more fluidly without rigid structure. And they give us a little figure, I guess, to show what that looks like. So raw idea or request, you shape it, you get some scopes mapped and fully mapped, and then, you just start to work. So the phases of work should still hold true, even when you don't work in cycles or have dedicated people for the shaping and the building. So, you'll have the same people shaping and doing the building. Then they move on to when your team is big enough to specialize, which is sort of maybe more our use case, right? So after more people come onto the team, fluidity flips from being an asset to being a liability, right? Winging it with ad hoc meetings and chat room discussions just won't work anymore because things will start to slip through the cracks. This is when it makes sense to take on a more formal structure of 6-week cycles and cooldowns and a formal betting table. The more people available to build, the more you need to carve out time to do the work of figuring out what to build. This means that some people's jobs will focus more on shaping rather than building. When you have dedicated shapers and builders, the work and picture is essentially just more structured, right? So cooldowns between cycles will mean that it gives everyone room to fix bugs and address loose ends that pop up. And the betting table is held during cooldowns, and then bets are placed for the next cycle. And then they give us this more structured image, right, of what a larger team might look like with shaping. So with more people, shaping and building happens on separate tracks, and bets are made to fill 6-week cycles. So essentially, on a larger team, what they're suggesting is that essentially you should have this more formal structure. You should maybe try to fit it into the 6-week cycles, and you should probably have these more specialized roles of people who are shaping versus people who are actually programming and designing, rather than a small team where it's just sort of everyone does a little bit of everything. That ends that chapter, and then we go into how to begin to shape up. So they give us a couple of options, right, on what might be some ways to start integrating shape up into your work style, right? So option A is a 1 6-week experiment, right? So instead of changing everything all at once, you should start off maybe with a 6-week experiment, right? So shape one significant project that could be comfortably finished within 6 weeks. You may suggest to be conservative and allow a lot of extra time, since this will be your first run on using ShapeUp, right? So carve out one designer and 2 programmers' times for the entire 6 weeks. Guarantee that nobody will interrupt them for the length of the experiment. Instead of a proper betting table, or simply plan for the team to do the work you shaped for this 1-week experiment. Kick off by presenting your shape work to the team, all the ingredients of a pitch. Set the expectation that they will discover and track their own tasks. Essentially, you're going to be handing over the responsibility to the team. Then dedicate a physical space or a chat room to the cross-functional team so that they can work closely together. I guess if we were doing this during remote, that would be a chat room, right? And then encourage them to get one piece done by wiring UI and code together early in the project. And so what this approach does is it lets us demonstrate success with one team in a single 6-week commitment, and hopefully the credibility gained from a good outcome. With the credibility gained from a good outcome, it'll be easier to lobby for a bigger change. Essentially saying, let's do this one experiment and let's show success from it, and maybe that'll allow us, with success shown, to integrate more of the shape-up process. Another option they give is just start with shaping, right? They say that sometimes it's not possible to get a team together for 6 weeks of work because somebody else controls the programmers or also the designer's time. In this case, start by shaping a compelling project with clearer boundaries than some of the past projects you've worked on. Present the project and put it through the existing scheduling process, whatever that process is. And better shaped work can shine a light on the engineering team and help open up things like longer cycles or a more deliberate process. So essentially, we want to, because in some teams, their process is already super integrated, and it's hard to even take, to do the 1-week, 6-week experiment with the one project, is essentially to sort of just integrate ShapeUp into your current process, is what I got from this. But by still using some elements of the shaping process, right? And by doing that, maybe you'll get a better result, which would also result in maybe more integration of ShapeUp. I think this is the last option they give, is to just start with cycles. So you can also just approach by starting to work in 6-week cycles. So, for teams used to 2-week sprints, this removes overhead of constant planning meetings and gives programmers more time to build momentum and hit their stride. Once the team has more room to breathe, it'll be natural to think more about shaping the work. So I thought this was an interesting suggestion. So essentially, you all we're taking from the shape up process is the timing. So we would just instead of doing, I guess in our case 1 week sprints, we would just start to work in 6 week cycles, and then slowly from working in 6 week cycles, they say it'll be natural to think more about shaping the work because of all the time we have. I thought it was interesting, just that idea of just starting with 6 week works. And then one of the last things they say here is to focus on the end result. I guess sometimes it can be scary to give teams more free rein to set their own schedule. There comes in questions of what if people sit idle for too long. They suggest to overcome these worries, we should shift the mindset from micro to macro. And the direct quote here is, how will we feel if we ship this project over 6 weeks? When projects shipped on time, everyone feels that they've made progress and it's a success. It doesn't actually matter what happened by the hour along the way. The outcome is really what matters in the end. I think that's definitely true. If as long as in that 6 weeks the things that we set out to accomplish are met, then I guess what happened along the way is certainly less important, and everyone will feel the better for it. And that's it. That's the end of Shape Up. That's the end of the little prologue there.
All right.
Nice.
All right.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I mean, I liked. It was cool to see. This whole book. I wondered, sort of like, oh yeah, like I like all of these ideas. Like they're all good. How does implementation start? And I thought it was funny that the main thing I think that they were trying to push was like, oh hey, use Basecamp, for this, which makes sense, right? Because they are Basecamp and they have this, this book. But yeah, I like some of the ideas of how to begin implementing. I mean, I guess I'm just interested, specifically in your thoughts, Forrest, and how a team like ours might begin implementing.
Yeah, so when I look at this, what I feel funny, and I don't remember if the exact words were there, but like at the beginning they go, we're not doing this, we're not doing that, we're not agile. But in the long run I go, oh, you are kinda agile, you're iterative, you're trying to learn. So what differs this from agile? What that differs. But the biggest thing I feel that Shape Up brings is how much work they do. Like we kind of have that little like parallel chart. We kind of have that, right? Mm-hmm. We got Jeff and Terry pre-shaping stuff, and actually, Alexis is in, UI UX. We do kind of try to pre-shape stuff, not necessarily to their definition, but we definitely try to get the stuff so by the time it comes to engineering, it's not, we have much more order than we used to. We get much well-defined things. We've learned what questions to ask in a lot of cases. And in some cases we're, of course, just like shooting from the hip. But so we kind of do that parallel thing. And when we definitely try to minimize it. So what I do find the biggest thing is the 6 week bet and not continuing. Mm-hmm. Like, which prefaces the thing that we don't do at all is, do we have the appetite for this?
Right.
And so for our normal jobs, we don't get to say, hey, they're going to do promotion X because it's Halloween. We don't get to say, well, I don't have the appetite for this crazy thing that changes themes 5 times, in the period of 3 weeks and then does all this random stuff. We don't actually get to say we don't have the appetite, though I kind of think we should, but that's an issue we can't broach. So there's a couple of freedoms in this process I feel that we don't have. Right. The thing that, I guess part of the rebellion against Agile is we don't want so many meetings, so I try my best to keep them as short as possible. Okay. Right? And we do a daily stand-up, which I don't feel is a burden because we get to hear what other people are doing. And I like that better than a chat room stand-up because people miss stuff in chat all the time. Mm-hmm. And then you get some big important thread, like you have an emergency, and then, you know, 76 lines earlier there was a message to me I missed.
Yeah.
Which, in previous days it was like physics jokes. But, arguably we could have another Slack room for that one, but I don't want 27 Slack rooms either.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, so I really like the idea of, here, I'm going to take you three guys and give it to you, and you guys can go uninterrupted. Like, last week, talk about big interruptions. We got a big interruption. There's no like, well, guess what?
Mm-hmm.
I guess if you had a big enough team, arguably, last week interruption was focused more on two people.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's one of these, what seems to be a big value of them is like, leave us alone and let us work.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good, and I definitely understand the don't get interrupted thing. Which it's a conflict, not of interest, but of like resources to be constantly aware and then be able to get your heads down and get into the groove. Mm-hmm. So they're clearly a company that values, let us get in the groove, and of course, trust us with the responsibility to do what happens. Mm-hmm. Right? There are managers that have to nag, and sometimes they don't have to nag; they just do anyways. Mm-hmm. My own philosophy. I try to minimize my nagging, and I feel it's better if I can make machines nag you.
Right.
Because then you don't get mad at me for nagging. But it goes back to, well, if I didn't have to nag, and again, there's an issue like, do you have to nag? Nag-based development, I don't think works that well, which is, some people's management styles.
Right.
Okay. So, and where I'm kind of back to, so I do feel it is, in the long run, they have iterations, and they say, we don't clean up, and then they introduce the cooldown. Well, then we do clean up. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that it's like, I'm trying to weigh whether work and then clean up, or clean up as you work.
Right.
Which tends to be more the agile thing. Clean up as you work. I think the thing that we miss the most is, take a look at our sprint goals or some of our cards. We have cards that have like been progress for 7 weeks.
Right.
And they say 3 points. Mm-hmm. And so, now, of course, Pivotal can't measure our velocity because it said 3 points for 7 weeks. And there's some other parts that are like, when do we cut the plug? That's the part where I go, I think that's the most, shaping appetite. I like the idea of appetite. I don't know that we can do that outside of like our op sector things.
Right.
Like I feel like we could probably almost do full blown shape up if we could fully dedicate to an op sector project or two. In fact, even in that nature as a project. Well, we might even build it in 6 weeks. Well, what could we build in 6 weeks? Mm-hmm. And pre-shape it and then pick, I don't know that we'll ever be able to do 100% op sectors thing, but like 50% of your time, 50% of Alexa's time, 70% of Brandon's time. Here's a 6-week thing we have an appetite for. I think we could do that for that one. I don't know that we could pull the method proper into our main stuff. So the key is what can we learn? What thing? I like the idea of the hill chart. I don't like the idea that the hill chart is manual, but I don't think it's possible to know that stuff not manual.
Yeah, right. There's no way for like a system to know like where in the process you are or something,
I mean, we could do the percentage of like card percentage. We could kind of like auto-generate one where if we have an epic and it's 62 points, we could kind of like do a hill chart through that one, but we know that actually that's not as accurate as the guy who sits down and says, you know what, the 80-20 rule. We're kind of 80% done, but we're really not.
Yeah, right.
And so it's kind of neat. I find it interesting that they have the climbing up the hill where we're making progress, but until we hit the top of the hill, we don't really know. Mm-hmm. And then when you're going downhill, you kind of know. So I guess I don't know that you can get around that being that making the hill chart manual, but I don't like the fact that the hill chart is manual.
Yeah. It requires someone to go in and actually edit that.
right? But I would imagine that Jeff or Terry would actually quite appreciate the hill chart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think the thing that's interesting, and I want to say I can't think we're unique, but we got a team, but we run like 4 or 5 things in a parallel all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fault? Is that right? Should we not be doing that? I don't know. I don't
So
know
you
that
said
I don't know that we can extricate us out of that though.
right, right.
Or
Yeah.
or okay, sorry. Say you were starting to say something. Yeah.
No. Yeah, you can finish on because I have a different point after that.
Like I think the implication from this is Basecamp has a bunch of programmers and designers, and they literally like create new sub teams for like every one of these projects.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to be the thing. And then in Basecamp, actually with Basecamp, pretty much I want to say their 6 weeks is roughly an equivalent to an epic,
Mm-hmm.
except they're fixed size, and our epics are very wide ranged in sizes. So they make like a new Basecamp project for each one, which, and arguably then they have their own chat room for that one, and that fits in with the leave us alone. These 3 guys are going to go over here and build something for 6 weeks. And I don't know at what company that makes sense. I don't know if it makes sense at our company, or maybe it does make sense at our company. I think we're so used to, and I feel it's because we're not that big, and we're kind of that startup scenario he was talking about. We're small enough everywhere and wears a bunch of hats, and like you have like 2 or 3 epics right now. So you jump in between the thing, and then, oh crap, I need this by Thursday, and then you jump more on that one. And that happens, and Alexis must like be in like 16 things at one time, I think. So I don't know that. Like I think it would be even weird for you to heads down say I'm just doing this for 6 weeks.
Right.
And I think some people want the luxury. So in some ways, we're kind of the startup. We wear many hats, and what are the lessons that we can pull? Except for the fact that we're not a startup and that we are not very ad hoc.
Mm-hmm.
But we do move in 1 week iterations, which I feel is good actually.
It's fast. Yeah.
We deliver software every week, sometimes multiple, but sometimes we get some issues where sometimes 1 week is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to break the cards. I don't think we do a bad job. So yeah, I don't know. What about Jeff or anyone else? Anyone else have any opinion? What can we borrow? What should we do? Should we have an epic that we shape up completely that's not an ops actor thing? Or what should we?
We probably couldn't use the 6 weeks. Which would alter the rules.
Yeah.
Well, we might want to say we have a longer term project, or I don't know what it is, the intranet or something. We might want to designate hey, this is going to be a 6-month project, right, or whatever, 6 week, whatever that time frame is. Because a lot of what we're concentrating on right now we basically become an internal marketing agency, right? A marketing, web shop kind of for internal marketing. So that you can't do in these long sprint things, but some of the other stuff we could try to designate a project. I don't know which one on a longer, term time frame. Let's say we're redoing we were going to improve the CMS entry interface. Maybe that we could do on a longer time frame rather than having a weekly sprint. So.
Yeah, I mean, but to some extent we did. Like Diego just joined. The whole CK editor was its own, though way more than 6 weeks. And arguably, looking back on that one, that could have been better shaped. Because as far as I can tell, that one was always in motion. Like Diego wrote a ton of code. And he showed a lot of features. And then stuff just kept changing and eventually ended up shelving it. But we still have all those branches in our code and so, but that was definitely something, and because actually I know a lot of that was actually going to production but under a site feature. right? Because even now we can turn it on, even though I don't know, it's been dormant.
Yeah.
Dormant for what, like
Well,
2 years now?
well, there's mass market is using it, right?
Are they?
I think so.
So, so because you came in the middle, we were just talking about like after what could we use from Shape Up, and then there was the part where they kind of showed it like, here's how you might adapt it if you're a small startup, just do it like this. You can use less formality because everyone wears a lot of hats, which I feel is very similar to our situation. We all wear lots of hats, and then you said, well, maybe you could just do the iteration, or maybe you could just Shape Up. So I have some suggestions, and I'm going, well, what can we do? What can we take from this? And I said a lot of the things I feel most innovative of the process, hard for us to do on our main work, but maybe something we would do for an ops sector project. But I'd like the idea of shaping, embedding, and appetite. Appetiting, we don't get to say no. I'm not going to do cyber promo because we don't.
I think a possible project that we could try this is like the redesign of the account settings, like that kind of stuff. Although it like the origin in the Shape Up process, the origin of the project is different than what we do, right? This redesign is coming. It's not something you're gonna get to bet on and approve it and do any of that kind of stuff. It's coming no matter what. But maybe some of the other processes regarding finding, going through like a thorough list of assessment prior to starting the project, so we know at least what where our weak points are going to be, our unknowns are, right? Like stuff like that. I don't know what other projects are coming besides.
Jeff, do you, without obviously being very revealing, what kind of projects do we have after cyber?
That's a good question. So one of the next projects we have after cyber is the redoing of the account settings page and the whole way we handle signing up. So that's something we could take a look at.
Right, but again, that's not something I think we can say. Oh, we don't have the appetite for that. Like.
Oh! You mean like what's a project we don't have the appetite for?
No, but it's like, well, I guess we're asking what future products are coming to see whether we could shape them up. It's like, and like, I feel like the core distinguisher between Agile and Shape Up is really appetites and betting. Everyone does pre-work. Everyone, 6 weeks is a biggish integration. That's kind of an epic, but it's fixed size. They have 2 tracks. We have 2 tracks. I feel where it stands out uniquely is the amount of shaping up and then bringing to the betting table, and then of course killing it if it doesn't fit in the 6 weeks. Those are the parts where I go, oh, well, we can't do any of that. We don't get any appetite. It's just you're going to eat this whether you like it or not, and we don't get to say, what, it didn't fit, so no account settings.
Yeah, so I mean, we did actually kill the. We didn't, I used the word kill, but we did kill the account settings because it wasn't going to fit into a reasonable time frame, be it whatever 3 months or 6 weeks or whatever. So we did actually kill that until next year. We kind of do that though we kind of do that in the before it gets to anyone. We kind of kill it. So for instance, there's a lot of, just for mass market, there's a lot of stuff that we basically. We do say no to everything from, there's all kinds of stuff on their list that we're like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. Like, no, that's not, you know what I mean? So we just usually don't release the list to everyone. So there is a whole, you could call, if we view the mass market as like a product as a whole, we have a whole feature list that the mass market team wants. And, we just, it's prioritized, so things keep getting pushed down or pushed to the bottom based on both, our bandwidth, but also like, no, that's not really we don't think that's really worth. Terry might say is that really worth it? Should we put that above other things? And then they're always like, well, no. So
arguably the appetite in our process is kind of in Terry's hands.
Yeah, I think so. Terry and Michael's hands, because she then goes. I don't. Sometimes she goes over with Michael, and they determine, yeah, let's leave that. Let's do that. Let's not do that one, kind of thing. There's everything on this list. There's everything from obviously account settings improvement to things like an Android app. A mass market iOS app. Things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Multi-seat functionality for Macro Pro, and so these things, they're still on this list, but they just get pushed down because we're like, yeah, that's not something we could complete in a reasonable time frame. And
yeah, so but again, that's all very agile, where we ask you to prioritize. We've got this much velocity, and you have 10 things, so you tell us the most important thing. And then we give them feedback. Well, this might be the most important thing, but this will take like 9 months. So would you rather have 3-month things that are second tier? And they may decide yes or no. So
yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So if we're wrapped up, do we have enough questions to ask Ryan to come over? Do we have questions? I wrote a couple down. Or did we just answer all the questions and I shouldn't bother him?
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know how many questions. I mean, I guess the questions I have were sort of specific to the team, and I feel like yeah, like we sort of have our some of the shaping up process is like out of our hands, unless it's like very specific projects,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if you'd have advice on how to things specific to our team,
Well, I mean, I think supposedly we could ask that of him and get his opinion. I would just hate to get him to schedule some time to video chat with us and have it be an 11-minute thing, which of course, if he tweets that he's going to be on, I'll probably have like 70 people on it,
Yeah.
And I would hate it if we didn't have questions.
Well, let's write some up, and if they're short, then we can send them to him maybe, and if they're long, we can schedule.
Oh. Yeah. Well, no, we need.
I was thinking maybe you would just answer him via text if.
Yeah. We need a deadline, like questions by a certain date, and then we can see whether we have something worth. And I'll ping him and see if he's still interested, because gosh, that was months ago when I asked him. And, I don't know what his actual current schedule. I know he was getting, he was writing bits about. He's been trying to do stuff with Alexander's timeless way of thinking. He was writing a lot, and he did like some mini broadcasts. So I know he's been spending some time with that one. So I don't know what his time is frame versus when I first asked him months before we started the thing. On that note, let's see if we got some questions. Or we can just share them in Slack. I'll share the ones I wrote down. If not, next book. Anyone have a preference, or shall I just pick? Like I said, I was leaning towards innovation, maybe beautiful design. Diego showed some project management books that might be interesting to me.
Let's vote on the book. Let's each pick a few book titles, then vote on it.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. Let's get some questions. Throw out some book things. Isn't there like a built-in Slack survey bot or something?
Probably.
This is like the Google one, like the Google surveys.
Right. I just figure there's got to be one built in. Nico bot, survey me this. Got to be something like that. Okay. Well, if that's it, any other comments, questions? Alexis, anybody? All right. Well, then, thank you, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.